Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, listeners. This is your host, Andy Curry. Welcome to my show today. I have someone with me with the same last name. I've never done that before. I'm excited about that. His name is George Curry. He is a professional speaker of 22 years. The content he speaks on is motivational speaking. That's very near and dear to my heart. I can't wait to hear what George has to say. George speaks primarily in the U.S., but he also does some international speaking. He is based out of Washington, D.C. He has written 3 books. His hottest book, as you would call it, is called Affirmative Action Debate, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So, George, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andy. I did come across another Curry who spells it C-U-R-R-I-E, and I told him he hasn't learned to spell his last name correctly.
You know, it's funny you say that because I talked to somebody like that, too, and I said that exact same thing to him.
Oh, really? Well, maybe they'll catch on. They're a little slow, but we'll work with it.
What's wrong with these people anyway?
I don't know.
Well, George, let's talk about your speaking business. We want to hear what you're telling people and how you're helping them. I'm excited to hear about this.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here with you, Andy. I think I look back at my background. I grew up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and I grew up during a time of segregation. I'm 68 years old. I tell people I'm approaching 50, but I don't tell them from which direction. And so you learn early that, and I guess I discovered early that you can handle adversity 2 different ways. And because I saw all of the separate water fountains, marked white and colored, and George Wallace stood in the schoolhouse door at the University of Alabama when I was in the 10th grade. And I saw my mother had to ride home when she did domestic work in the back of a car. It's just 2 ways you can deal with that. And for me, neither of my parents finished high school. And I had 3 younger sisters. And I told my younger sisters, I say, look, if you're ever in the backseat of anybody's car, it's going to be because you are being chauffeured, because it requires a different mindset. And so I told them they were going to college. I didn't know how they were going to college, but they're going to go. And they did. All 3 went. They all graduated. And I just learned early that, it's not so much what your circumstances are, it's how you respond to them, how you react to them. And that was something I guess I just learned at a very, very early age. And I was able to apply it one time, speaking at the university. And for some reason, these guys came up to me afterwards, and they were all depressed. And they said, really, really down because my father wasn't a part of my life. I said, really? They said, yeah. I said, well, let's look back a little bit. I said, you ever heard of Frederick Douglass? They said, yes, sir. I said, Frederick Douglass' daddy was at home. They said, really? I said, yeah. I said, you ever heard of W.B. Du Bois? They said, yeah, the great civil rights leader. I said, yeah. His daddy left when he was 11 years old. I said, have you ever heard of Jackie Robinson, the person who broke the color line in baseball? They said, yeah. I said, what about Jesse Jackson? They said, yeah. How about Al Sharpton? Yeah. How about Barack Obama? I said, yeah. I said, their daddy wasn't home. I said, my daddy wasn't home. I said, it's their loss, not yours, so get over it. And sometimes, Andy, it's just a matter of them letting them know that they are not alone. Mm-hmm. That you can get over things, that what you're going through, you're not the only person who's going through it.
Right. Well, that's terrific. I think a lot of times, George, and maybe you agree, disagree, I don't know, but a lot of times people are stuck because they don't know they don't have to be stuck.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. As I heard the guy, I used to work in a journalist 45 years. I worked one time in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and later on the Chicago Tribune before that Sports Illustrated magazine. And I heard a guy say one time, sometimes people on crutches so long they forget how to walk. And so you just tell people to throw away the crutch. Right? People say, think outside the box. I said, no, don't think outside the box. If you think outside the box, you'll get another box for people who think outside the box. Throw the box away. And it's an attitude. It's like a flat tire, I heard someone say once. It's like, if you don't fix it, you're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere till you fix the flat tire. And the flat tire is your attitude. and how you deal with these challenges that all of us are going to face.
That's a great point. Now, do you have kind of several topics in your motivational speeches? How do you go about deciding what you're going to say?
Well, I basically, nothing's more powerful when you're dealing with public speaking than to tell your story. And that's what makes speakers so different. Only you can tell your story. And my goal is when I finish a speech, is to inform, to inspire, and to encourage. And so I tell them through my story. Some I've already shared with in terms of my background, but I also tell people I've written 3 books. My first book I got turned down by 25 publishers. 25 publishers. And I said, I ended up about 3 or 4 years later sending out again a book proposal, and I got accepted by one of those publishers who had turned me down. And so at home I have 2 letters framed. One saying, "We don't want your manuscript," and the other one, I remember the word on it to this day. It says, "We're delighted to send you a check." And I was delighted to receive it, Andy. And so it's like you just cannot quit, because if you quit, you don't know that one time you quit, you just made one more call or push forward just one more time, that it would be the difference between failure and success.
Right.
It is so important. And so I tell people, and this is one of my favorite lines, is I said, you have to learn how to reject rejection. You're going to get rejection. It's like I got rejection on my book proposal. But you got to reject rejection. I'd read somewhere where a young lady had gotten rejected for a job. And so she sent them a letter rejecting their rejection. Now, I don't know if they ever hired her or not, but I think if somebody did that to me, I would have to hire them. I like the idea that you're going to reject my rejection letter.
That is funny.
And so it is about that. It really is about that. I had a kid, I was editor of a magazine called Emerge, and a friend had recommended a writer to join my staff. And I didn't return his call deliberately. And he called back, and I didn't call him back the second time. He called back again. I didn't answer. On the 4th time, I took his call, and we started talking. I ended up hiring him. Mm-hmm. Now, I wanted to see what he was made out of. Now, if he would get discouraged when somebody told him to contact me, and he would give up because I didn't return his call, that's not the kind of reporter I want to hire. That's not the kind of person I want. I want a person that, you're going to get knocked down. Will you get up, or are you just going to sit your behind out on the ground? And so you don't know when you're being tested. And that's what I tell Marty. You don't know when you're going to be tested.
Right.
But you got to always reject rejection.
Interesting. That rejection, I think, is like in sales. That's, I think, one of people's biggest fears, and reframing what rejection really is a big help, doesn't you say?
Yeah, it's crucial. And again, it goes back to your mindset. I remember reading a quote by a French mathematician, Blaise Pascal, I use sometimes, and he said, "You are today where the thoughts of yesterday have brought you, and you will be tomorrow where the thoughts of the day take you." You are today where the thoughts of yesterday have brought you, and you will be tomorrow where the thoughts of the day take you. And so it's important to have the right kind of thoughts, to see and project success and where you're going to be, and not let somebody else define you. I remember I mentioned my mother did domestic work when I was growing up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And my mother worked for a banker. There was only one bank in town. And she did domestic work for them. She cleaned the kids' nose and cooked the food. And I would see my mother come home in the back seat of a car. And there was 2 people in the car. But the lady who drove my mother had my mother sitting in the back. I got to tell you, Andy, that bothered me, and I can still see that image today.
I don't blame
you. But to me, I was just so determined, like, that's not going to happen to me. That's not going to happen to my 3 sisters. And I was on C-SPAN one time, And this lady called in, and she had this Alabama accent. You know, she said, how are you doing? I'm glad to call. And I recognized her voice. And it was one of those kids my mother had kept.
Really?
And I said, isn't that something? I said, look, she was the daughter of a banker, the only bank in town. And so she came for money. Now here I am, the son of a domestic whose father did leave the home. And she's calling TV, calling to talk to me instead of me calling her. And I just tell people, I said, it doesn't matter where you start, just where you end up. And so, you know, you're not dictated. Your future's not dictated by where you started. It doesn't matter where you started. It doesn't mean anything about the character or who you are. You dictate that.
What a great story. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I was shocked. I told Mom about it later on, and she started laughing. She really called you George? I said, yeah, Mom, she called me Arizona. I remember what she called for. And she's, you know, fine young lady and everything. But the idea that the son of domestic who grew up in a housing project, that she's called in TV to get his advice instead of vice versa. I don't know many people who would have predicted that when I was growing up in Tuscaloosa.
Oh, yeah. You just never know. Now, what a terrific story. Is that part of your story when you're talking to audiences?
Yeah, it is. And it's so important, and to share who you are with the audiences. Public speaking is not just a matter of just you speaking down to somebody or them seeing you up on a platform. It's a conversation.
It is.
And particularly when you're talking to young people, it's so important for them to know that you started where they started, that your circumstances are not indifferent from theirs, and therefore you give them hope and inspiration that they can overcome those odds. But if you project that you are somebody who always had things given to you, that you never had to work for it, that somehow that they're going to take a shortcut in life, there are no shortcuts in life. And they need to hear it. And they need to hear it from somebody who's set where they's at. And it means the world to them. That's why I spent the time with those young boys I was telling you about earlier, who worried about their daddy not being home. I said, my daddy wasn't home either. I said, my daddy was a drunk. I said, I know you educated people say, oh, my father was an alcoholic. No, my daddy was a drunk. Alcoholics have to go to meetings and be part of 12-step program. My daddy didn't do any of that stuff. He was a drunk. And so I can laugh about that now, but I've not always been able to laugh about it. I don't drink to this day. You know, some people follow that footstep, but I don't drink because I saw that enough in my life growing up.
Right.
And so kids need to see that, and they need to know that you can overcome it.
You know, I have to say, and I'm pretty sure I know how you're going to respond to this, but your mother went to bat for you because, of course, she had you, and the love of a mother there's just nothing like it. And I would imagine you all but worship the ground she walks on, and she's got to be someone ultimately special in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and it's not just a mother, Andy. It's a group of ladies, in particular ladies, who grew up where I grew up, who, before you thought you could be anything in life, who inspired you and let you know that you could do anything you want to in life. And they kind of planted that seed in your mouth, and they kind of adopted you in this whole community. I think about, although my father wasn't in the home, my stepfather came in, had a great impact on me. I played football in high school and college. I played quarterback, and my football coaches were important to me. The head of my housing project was important to me. And so the principal of my high school principal would tell us, even on the days of segregation, he said, one day there's going to be integration. You got to be ready when integration comes. And I'm like, okay, I got to be ready. So, you go out and work your butt off. You study hard because you would have opportunities that your parents could never even dream about. And you can't afford to squander that. Right. And I think that a lot of times now we don't teach the ethics of just hard work sometimes. I see it so often now that kids see where you are at a certain point in life and think that somehow there's a shortcut to it. That isn't. You got to work your butt off. You got to work hard. And so now I go out and do public speaking. I'm making more in a 20-minute speech than my mother made in a whole year. And the kids think that you're supposed to start there. No, that's where you end up. That's when you've earned it. That's when you establish your reputation, and people will pay you for that. You don't start off doing that. And so they need to know and understand that you got to work your behind off. I said, I used to voluntarily work on Saturdays and Sundays, my days off, because I want to improve. I want to get better. And that's your price. And most successful people get to pay a price for excellence. It doesn't just happen. And sometimes it's the people who can have less ability, but more tenacity and more determination. And they're the one who make it out. They're the one who is successful because they were really willing to work. I know a lot of kids back in Alabama who had a lot of skill, but they're still there now because they didn't have the drive. They didn't have the motivation. They had the skills. They had the potential, but they didn't have the work ethic. And that made all the difference in the world.
Right. Huge. George, let's talk real quick. We got like a minute or two about your affirmative action debate book. Tell us about that.
It's a book. The affirmative action debate is such a big issue now because it'll be before the Supreme Court. The court had ruled in a case 2 years ago involving the University of Texas 10% plan. They sent it back to the lower court. It'll be before the Supreme Court again. And the affirmative action debate covers all sides of that controversial action that we thought that we had solved in the University of Michigan rulings a couple of years ago. But it's not. This issue that this country is struggling with as it becomes more and more diverse.
Okay. Well, George, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, how can people get a hold of you should they want to hear you speak or know more?
Contact me, George at georgecurry.com, or my website, georgecurry.com. Or follow me on Twitter, Curry George, my first name last, and the last name first, and you can follow me that way. Okay.
Well, folks, you heard it here. And, George, thank you for joining us and giving us some insight into your speaking. The motivational information is I just love that, and your story is awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the work you're doing, Andy.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.